this the launch of the new book of Professor Keun Lee for this session in the 50th ENEI, the Brazilian meeting of economics of innovation. It's a great pleasure to me. My name is Renato Garcia from University of Campinas, and for me it's a great pleasure to share this session. I think everybody knows Professor Keun Lee is an old friend from us. We acknowledge, we thank Keun for being with us. It's a Thursday morning in Seoul, in Korea, South Korea, and it's a pleasure for us to have this discussion and this event during the ENEI this year. We will have together with Professor Keun Lee, we will have Ana Burcharth from the Dom Cabral Foundation, Fundação Dom Cabral, she will make some comments and to present some questions for the debate. For us, it's a pleasure because it's almost a global launch of the new book of Professor Keun Lee. The name of the book is China's Technological Leapfrog and Economic Catch-up, a Schumpeterian perspective. Professor Keun Lee is professor at the Seoul National University, was former president for the International Schumpeterian Society during the period 2016 to 2018, and he is now currently editor from one of the most prestigious academic journals at Economic of Innovation, is the Research Policy. The new book of Professor Keun Lee talk about Professor Keun Lee have a lot of studies on catch-up, on middle income, technological catch-up, economic catch-up, middle income trap. But in this book, Professor Keun Lee take a specific look at China. After the miraculous economic growth known as the Beijing consensus, China is now facing a slowdown. The attention has moved to the issue, to the middle income trap, or the situation in which economic growth slows down as a country reaches the middle income stage. This book, the book we are launching today, deals with this interesting issue in the context of China. It also discusses China limitations and future prospects, especially after the rise of the new Cold War between China and the United States. For me, it's a pleasure, again, to present Professor Keun Lee, to make a presentation of his book. Keun, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Renato. Okay, it's great opportunity to be here in this global audience to introduce my book. So let me try to share my slide. Okay. Okay, so I hope you can see the slide. Okay,
yeah.
As announced.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll be introducing my new book on China. Okay, looking China from Schumpeterian perspectives. So this is the actual cover image of the book. Book is not yet out. It will be published in fall this year, so some months later. Okay. So this is global first preview of the this book. So I'm very excited. Yeah. It's from Oxford University Press. Yeah. So these are the main contents of the book. Chapter 1 is titled as Introducing Schumpeter to China. Then it has 3 parts. Part 1 is origin of catching up and early effort. So I look at what's the origin of Huawei, which is like China's Samsung, how it grow in early stages. Then I also talk about origin and growth of big business in China, because Schumpeterian look at big business as source of innovation. Right? Then I look at case of semiconductor industry, where China is catching up effort is not much made success. So I call limited success, limited catch up. Okay. Then part 2, looking at China's catching up in comparative perspectives. Okay. Using the term Beijing consensus, Washington consensus, and East Asian consensus or model. Okay. Then I look at several key manufacturing sectors in China in comparison with similar sectors in Korea. Okay. Then I look at the case of IT services. Okay. Then role of government. And chapter 8 is conducting patent database analysis of Huawei, how it is overtaking Ericsson from Sweden in telephone switch market. Part 3 is conclude to discuss prospect to catch up leapfrogging, discuss issue of middle income trap, and final chapter is about broader context, including US-China conflict. So I touch up issue of 2 CDS trap and global value chain and future of China. So I cannot cover all these books, all of these chapters. So today I focus on mainly part 3, which is most recent issues and which might be more interesting. Okay. And some of my earlier chapters are partly available from my other articles, which are available from my homepage, keunlee.com. So you can also look at those paper versions. This is the rewriting for the book. Okay. So today's topic is about 2 traps, as mentioned, introduced by Renato, middle income trap. And another trap is 2 CDS trap, which is about G2 hegemony war in terms of Cold War. So 2 CDS name of a historian who lived in ancient Greece. He talked about that when there is a rise of new power, there will be a war between incumbent power and rising power. So I hope China, US will not take a real hard war, but they are now in the almost Cold War. So in this book, 2 CDS trap is situation that China's economic growth slowing down due to the US measures reaction. Okay, so these 2 are big challenges facing China, 2 traps. Okay. So this is overview of the economic growth rate in China over the last 40, 50 years. So China reform open door policy started in 1979. There's some growth and there are some business cycle. East Asia model, Beijing consensus. And lastly, since 2008, China facing really steady slowdown of growth, reaching less than 5, 7%, 6%. So people are talking about China is facing middle income trap. This year, 2021, China's growth rate might be even slower than that of US. US recovering very rapidly, okay, anyway, because of they have very big minus growth rate last year. Okay. So there are many discussions about Beijing consensus. One version is that without Western democracy, you could have growth. Without major privatization or financial liberalization, we could have growth. Even with the Communist Party or authoritarian regime, we could have growth. With the selective opening, we could have growth. So China achieving growth without conventional recommendation by World Bank, IMF. In that sense, it is unconventional approach. That's why people call Beijing consensus different from Washington consensus. Okay. But this is a broad definition. In my own research, in this book, there is a small, more focused definition of Beijing consensus, focusing on this industrial catching up. Okay, so first element is you learn from FDI in parallel, but in parallel you promote indigenously owned company. That's where China is doing very well. You invite FDI, but you don't stop that, but imitate them and promote locally owned companies. Second, forward engineering, which is opposite to reverse engineering. Reverse engineering means that you are doing imitation. But forward engineering means that you are using basic knowledge from academias to promote university spin-off or university run companies that are very active in China. Okay. Third element is China tried to acquire technology and brand through international M&A. China acquiring globally. They're acquiring many Korean companies, some Western companies. Thereby, they can absorb technology and brand. So these are very unique element. Not much happened in Korea, Taiwan in the past. So this is another way of understanding China catching up. But as you mentioned, China is moving. So Beijing consensus was very famous term in China about 10 years ago. But now they are all talking about middle income trap and two-CDS trap. Middle income trap, as you know, is slowdown of economic growth in middle income stages, or you are stuck between 20 to 40% level of US income for several decades. So 40% is upper middle income. If you above 40%, you considered as high income countries. 20 to 40% is upper middle income ranges. So that means MIT middle income will happen because you are caught between low wage manufacturers and high wage innovators. So as you grow, your wage become higher and higher. So you lose competitiveness in low wage based sectors, whereas you are not that innovative enough to produce high end goods. So that's your nature of trouble in middle income stages. So this is a graph to understand middle income trap. So this is US. Each country is drawn to in terms of their level to US in relative terms. Okay, so many countries in emerging countries in these ranges around 10 to 20. Korea excel to reach 70%, which is now same as Japan or Italy, UK. And Malaysia is some modest catching up, reaching 45. So Malaysia is showing some sign that getting out of middle income trap. But other Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, some catch up very slow. So they are the one example of middle income trap. Okay. So Korea was similar to Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia in 80s and 70s, or even lower than that in 60s. Okay. So more countries, same graph. You can see this is Korea, Japan around 70% US, Germany 80%. Here Brazil around 30%, similar to China today. China is now getting over Brazil. India is still around below. So China's pocket income is now close to Brazil. Okay, it's catching up. So issue China will be like Korean pattern, fast catch up, or China might be slowing down. That's the issue. Okay. So our first question is whether China will be okay from middle income trap, and we discussed that in terms of 3 checkpoints. Okay. In my art article, I done cross-country regression to show that low to middle income stages, basic political institution, and education are important. But from middle to high income countries, R&D and college education are significant. So using that result, I first asked whether China will be innovative enough, because Roderick or some other Western economists said that China's authoritarianism cannot go together with innovation. So we'll see whether that's true or not. Second, does China have enough big businesses? Because big business is the one way of a country's kind of growth beyond middle income stage. You got to have a more big business to join high income, like a big business in the level of Fortune 500. And lastly, about inequality or equity. You have to have a more equalized growth to become high income. So we'll be assessing China in terms of these three criteria very quickly. First, this is the R&D GDP ratio, one indicator of innovation. Usually 1 point is threshold, and this income level, these are all countries. So it's clearly China, Korea is outlier in terms of R&D GDP ratio compared to comparable income countries. So China is putting big emphasis on innovation, different from other countries who are not paying enough or below the 1%. Okay. Another criteria is number of patents filed in US. So this is the patent filed US. Korea is now just past Germany to be number 3 after US, Japan, Korea. And China is getting close very fast, already more than Taiwan and more than India. Okay, so in this criteria too, China is getting really innovative. Okay. Big businesses, how many you have as Fortune 500 globally? And this is US. US was used to have almost 200, but since the IT bubble burst in 2000, it kept declining and less than 100. This is Japan. Japan used to have 150, but less than 60. This is China, only used to have 2 or 3, but nowadays 110, 20, almost same as US. This year, last year, China has more than US in terms of Fortune 500. Okay, so in my previous paper, I confirmed that having or not enough big business is one criteria to go beyond middle income trap. Okay. And this is actual data. Okay. So typical European countries, France, Germany, UK has between 30 to 40, Korea is 16 and so on. Okay. So Brazil has also increased 2 to 8, India 1 to 7, Russia 0 to 4. So the BRICS rise also consistent with in terms of this growth of big businesses. Okay. Taiwan, famous for SME-based growth, but Taiwan also has generated from 2 to 10. That's why Taiwan joined high-income economies. Okay. But Mexico, Malaysia only 1 or 0. Okay. And last criteria is equity. So we can talk about that in terms of Kuznets curve. He predicted that Gini coefficient inequality will increase, but after some point it will decrease as you join high income. So that happened in Korea with 1970 turning point. Since then, Gini coefficient decreased until Asian crisis, but now increase again after all opening globalization. China seems to be around this period, around 2010, 20. There seems to be going over this Kuznets curve turning point. You can see this is Gini coefficient. It increased, but now stop increasing, show some decrease, but not that very fast. So although China is doing well in terms of innovation, big business, they are still facing big challenge in terms of inequality issues. So first summary is that, as mentioned, China is strong in innovation, big businesses, but more uncertainty in terms of handling inequalities. So some sign of inequality slowing down, but new source of inequality from wealth and corruption is still going on. And that's the challenge facing China's leadership. Okay. Then let's turn to another trap, Thucydides trap, okay, which is whether China will be facing new source of slowing down due to US-China trade conflict and hegemony struggles. Okay. So this is triggered by Trump charging tariff against import from China. So after this shock, China's performance was very weak, but nowadays China seems already recovering from the initial shocks. But around that time, The US-China conflict can be understood in terms of a global change in global geopolitics. You can mean three things. First, whole world change. We used to all praise free trade, but now every country doing protectionism. WTO is almost collapsed. Democracy in crisis in many countries with the rise of authoritarianism or nationalism or populism. So we see many strongman style leaders around the world, including Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, Abe, even Duterte in Philippines and so on. Okay, maybe also in Brazil too. I don't know. Okay, so and Sino-US conflict is new Cold War, but this new change has a common root, which is asymmetric recovery from 2009 global financial crisis, leading to more inequality. So after global crisis, US was printing a lot of money, so that helped boost up stock prices, but it didn't create much real increase in job. So there's more inequality. Okay, so that brought Trump came into power and blaming China for all these problems. Okay, and they become more authoritarian style leadership. It's a crisis of global capitalism in a sense. Okay. This is famous graph from AER paper showing that decrease of share of US manufacturing jobs, the rise of share of China in US import market. So this paper somehow proved that US manufacturing decline has to do with the rise of China in US import market. That become basis for charging tariff against import from China. Even Biden, they still stop the tariff. This tariff is still going on. But US import from China nowadays skyrocketed. Why? Because US had import a lot of medical suppliers from China, even mask, face mask, many medical supplies, all from China. So there are big increase of China export to US. So coronavirus kind of helping China. So whether we are witnessing G2 hegemony war, to be called new Cold War, there have to be three conditions to be met. First, rivalry ideology. It seems going on. China used to follow US, but after seeing global crisis, China's recognition that, oh, maybe my system is better than US system. That's recognition by Xi Jinping. So US is no more role model for China to imitate. Okay, and they are rival in military powers. China military expenditure about 63% US, which is same as the ratio of GDP. And to compete, they have to be economically separated. Okay, but US China already coupled a lot. They are, in a sense, same boat. So in a sense, it's too late to be decoupled. In other words, in former Cold War between US Soviet Union, they two economy was not that much interdependent. They are separate. So they compete possible. But nowadays, US China too much already coupled each other. So very difficult to separate economic competition in a sense. Okay. And for example, Apple mobile phone and Tesla's electric car, biggest market is China already. Okay. So from today, we can see that China is importing a lot from US and Japan. Biggest trading partner of China is US and Japan, much more than other emerging countries. Okay. Number one. Also, US rely heavily on China. Used to be very small, but nowadays almost 20% in growth based, even value added. US is China import is more than 2 times bigger than import from Canada or Mexico and so on. Okay, so they are interdependent each other. Very painful to decouple. Okay. Whereas China is trying to reduce its reliance on foreign trade and FDI. So China trade GDP ratio peaked in 2007. It tended to decline as China turning to more domestic market-oriented economic growth. They rely less on FDI. FDI peaked to very long time ago, keep declining. China switching to more domestic financing. So there are structural change going on since 2008, changing in a growth, relying more on domestic. They call double circulation. Okay, so less FDI, more indigenous company, less export, more domestic market, less investment, more consumption-driven growth, less coastal province, but more inland-based growth. This was going on since 2010, but it all disrupted after the G2 conflict, after Trump, or two-series trap. China emphasizing again FDI, again coastal provinces, again export and so on. So China also faced some disruption after this G2 conflict. Okay. This graph shows that China share in the global GDP, how big China is globally. China used to be less than 5%, but reached around 17%, 2020. Exactly, it was like Japan in 1990. Japan was exactly the same size as China, but Japan collapsed. So US hoped China face same trouble as Japan. But you know, Japanese collapse was due to Plaza Accord, which appreciated the currency. So China trying to avoid Korean-style financial crisis, also Japan-style financial shock. So China declined, resist not to appreciate its currencies. Okay, so China is learning from Japan and Korea. Okay. This is China's size compared to US. Okay. China used to be very small, but now reached almost 70% of US level. So let's have forecast when China will become same or bigger than US. I guess it might be early 2030. So if we extend last 5 years, where China used to be 6% in 2015, but now 7% in 2020. So they made 10 percentage point catch up in 5 years. That means to close the gap, 30% gap, it will take 15 years. So it will be 2035. We extend project based on last 10 years. They made catch up, 30% catch up from 40% to 7% 10 years. Then will be China bigger than US in 2030. So within 10 to 15 years, China's size will be same as US. That bothers US because in geopolitics, size of GDP means size of military power too. Okay. This shows China's share, US share in global trade. In terms of goods export, China already bigger than US with 20%. But in terms of service, US is still bigger than China. If you combine these two, they are almost same. Okay. I have data for R&D, global R&D size. China, US almost same. China catching up, not based on this trade, but also in this R&D expenditures. Okay. So another topic is we talk about two traps, middle income trap and two CDS trap. Let's make it TT, MIT and TT. I think there are key linkage variable between these two traps, which is global value chain, GVCs. Okay, so as you know, GVC is the network of production and outsourcing. And US does not want to rely on China-led GVC, so they want to decouple. US does not want to buy from China-made telephone system and China-made semiconductor chips, but China already established GVC. Okay, so GVC measure is that one measure is that share of foreign value added in gross export. Korean experience that from 1980 to 2000, Korea decreasing. That means Korea is using more domestic intermediate part, reducing reliance on foreign value added. Okay. The localized used to many parts which used to import, high-tech import. Okay. China is doing that too. This is aggregate data. China is sharply decreasing. That means China replacing foreign intermediate by domestic goods. And this happening every sectors, IT sectors, automobile sectors too. So China making everything made in China. So this further going on after US pressure, because US stopping export of high-tech part to China. So China had to quickly domesticate those parts. It will take time, but trend is going on that way. So China said, we are having trouble, but in the long run, we might be able to win. That's the hope by Chinese people. Okay, so the two traps depend upon how China quickly consolidating GBC on their own. Okay, so there is a GBC war between two superpowers. Okay. This is the data auto sectors. This is China data, keep decreasing. Thailand or other countries very high. That means they're still relying on foreign imported intermediate part. Korea used to decrease, but Korea open globalized to 2000. But China used to 45%, now it's then 15%. Share of imported good, now very small. China is making everything made inside China. China reading China read GBCs. That's what bothers USA. Okay. So let me try to conclude by a couple of slides. First, prospect of China catching US before the new trap, TT. So far, successful catching up around the East Asia model plus Beijing consensus. Fast grading catching up, leapfrogging into 4.0 technologies. Export-led growth, detour strategy of specializing first in short cycle, now trying to turn into long cycle technologies, bio or machinery goods and so on. And for that, there are two new windows opportunity for China to leapfrog. First is global financial crisis in the West, and fourth, industrial revolution, which was window opportunity for China to leapfrog. Okay. But it was recently interrupted by US-China tension since Trump plus Biden. But COVID-19 new factor for disruption, helping China, because COVID-19 China's growth rate still plus 5-6%, 4% in last year. Only a big country recorded plus growth rate. More other countries recorded minus growth rate. That means China's economic size compared to US still getting bigger at faster speed. In the sense, the gap was closed in faster manner because of different growth rate after the COVID-19. Okay. Now, after the emergence of new trap, to see this, China facing a new trap before it built enough economic powers. Economic size still small like Japan before. So China taking long-term view on trade wars, but they still rely on West for key technologies. So it might take time China to be more indigenous. So China catch up in size broadly delayed, but pick up again partly owing to COVID-19. US may be too late to start the war or to start decoupling. Already they are too much interdependent. So it's not enough for US to stop China only by trade measures, which is different from sanction against Russia. Okay, so in the short run, US gaining some impact, but also US firm also suffer if it goes more radical dimensions. And US not easy to keep the war. Okay. Nowadays, it's changing from trade conflict under Trump era to hegemony struggle in high-tech areas in Biden period. So G2 conflict will persist for a while in diverse forms. It does not sound good for whole world economy, including other small countries like Korea, maybe even for Brazil. So we need more peace to growth, but all countries become protectionist in their own market. It's not good for global economy. High-tech hegemony will affect negatively China in the short term, long-term prospect more complicated. China might find more domestic sourcing possible. Okay. This shows who are doing well in academic publication in SCI articles. 2008, US #1, China is half of that, but now China is #1, US is half of US, half of China, US half of China. The big rise of, I did the same thing, this is IT, but same thing, bio or nanotechnologies. And maybe I'll skip this, okay. But for me, more risk coming from China's inside rather than outside. So in a sense, China's precarious equilibrium. And Milanovic wrote the book saying that China is a state-led political capitalism. Okay, so the system is run based on efficient bureaucracy, weak rule of law, and autonomous state. But such regime tended to bring in inequality, increasing corruption, coming from weak rule of law, and which also might economic performances. Already, here, top 10 richest people in China is that higher than 40%, similar to US level. So new source of corruption and inequalities. Such corruption tendencies were checked in Korea, Taiwan, because these two state capitalism went through democratization and strengthened rule of law. Okay, but it's not happening yet, not yet in China. Okay, so thereby they have not fallen into middle-income trap, but realizing classical Kuznets curve of decreasing inequality in the later stage development. In China, we have to see whether they will happen or not. Whereas from East Asian capitalism perspective, which is combination of political authoritarianism and economic mercantilism, it tended to have a weak financial sector, vulnerable to exogenous shocks. So it needed to rising corporate debt, non-performing loans in government-controlled financial sectors, which looks similar to today's China as happened in 1990 Korea before the financial crisis. Okay, so China still capital market closed, but financial turmoil always in possibility because China's corporate debt is ever increasing. This shows the debt ratio in China by manufacturing very high. Also government debt also high. Okay. And more debt in local government. More debt. Okay. Also, last word is that, so we can conclude, China's catching US was somewhat derailed after the G2 conflict, but also a bit boosted by the COVID-19 because China recorded more fast growth rate than other countries. But now there are issues from trade-based war to high-tech hegemony war, more specific high-tech part. Some short-term gain by US, but longer term we are not sure. Okay. In longer term, I see China subject to more internal system-wide problems than threatened by external forces. Now China is saying that we will be okay from US actions. Okay, this common China perception. Okay, nowadays. Okay, but I see more problem from China's internal political economic system. Okay. China are facing whether Xi Jinping will have a third term or not. They have to decide next year. Okay, then it will be first president of China who is serving third term. This is against Chinese tradition, so it's a source of uncertainty. Okay. So thank you. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Keun Lee. It's a very interesting presentation, and I think everybody will have the opportunity to download both chapters that are available in your website. I put in the chat of the YouTube the link for your personal webpage when the chapters of the book can be downloaded. Well, I invite now Dr. Ana Burcharth from Fundação Dom Cabral, Fundação Dom Cabral, to make some comments. Please, Ana, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much to be here. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Renato. Nice to meet you again, Professor Keun. It's the second time that we have the chance to do this book launch, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I'd like to start also by thanking the organizers, Marcia, Eduardo, for the opportunity to read your work again and also comment on it. We've done that before, and then two book reviews came out that were published, both in a Brazilian journal, but also in a Japanese one. So that was a very interesting experience. One caveat that I think Renato already mentioned is that I've had access to chapters 1 and 10. So please bear in mind that my comments come from reading these two chapters. And I did prepare a slide deck I'd like to share with you. Yes. Is it okay, Renato?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Great.
Okay.
So I've prepared here, I've organized my comments into these three topics. Book overview, why to read Professor Keun's latest book. Second, some highlights of some of the ideas that really struck me and were very insightful. And finally, some questions to warm up the audience. So to begin with, I've prepared a kind of non-exhaustive list of characteristics of the book that I think make it unique and make reading very recommendable, but also very pleasant. The first point relates to the overall objective of the book, which is an assessment of the Chinese catch-up. And Professor Keun's work is very original and offers a truly thought-provoking perspective for this phenomenon that continues to puzzle the world. So why has China grown to an economic and geopolitical superpower in the last 3 decades? Will it continue to grow and overcome the middle income trap? Will it eventually surpass the US as a world hegemonic power? And the book provides really interesting evidence in this regard, showing that China is performing well in terms of technology and criteria as innovation and big business, as Professor Keun just showed us some statistics, but the uncertainty really lies in the criteria of equality as measured, for instance, by the Gini coefficient. My own reading is that Professor Lee is rather optimistic in this matter, but at the same time quite cautious, as I think his presentation also revealed, because, well, in one point he explicitly states that the expectation is that China will catch up with the US by the early 2030s. On the other hand, he discusses this triple trap of China: middle income trap, two-sided trap, and democratization trap. And also showing the possibility of a slowdown of China's US catch-up in the high-tech sectors, and calling this need for a multi-dimensional leapfrogging if China wants to surpass the US. And then I also thought this idea of multi-dimensional leapfrogging a very unique and original contribution as well. I think also in the presentation tonight, it became very clear that the book uncovers these key features of the so-called Beijing consensus, including learning from direct foreign investment, forward engineering, and going global at an earlier stage of economic development. And so the book's perspective on the so-called Beijing consensus is rather unique. And the main claim here is that China has expanded in economic size, not owing to improving political institutions, but owing to an increasing share in global export, R&D, patent registration, and inbound foreign direct investment, as we've seen also in the many figures Professor Lee shared with us. As the title says, the book takes this Schumpeterian lens meaning that it reads the Chinese context through the lens of technological development, with a particular emphasis on large businesses. And the main point here is that technological leapfrogging is a precondition for success in technological catch-up and in closing the gap with incumbents in terms of technological capabilities. And last but not least, the book is a really pleasant reading. And I think a main advantage of the book is that Professor Lee is able to condense a very complex phenomenon of geopolitics into very clear arguments. And he's really able to focus on the essence without running the risk of being oversimplified. I think we all had a taste also here in your nice presentation. My second point relates to some highlights. And again, I don't mean to be exhaustive here, but some ideas that were very, very inspirational for me, or that provided me a new lens to look into technological catch-up. The first one relates to this idea of cloning versus divergence. And so the book discusses in great depth the trade-offs in catch-up strategies regarding the choice of emulating old technologies of incumbents, the so-called path-following strategy, versus skipping some older technology and adopting the most up-to-date technology, which is called the stage-keeping strategy, or even utilizing a new techno-economic paradigm in the path-creating strategy. Very interesting. The second point here relates to the role, I find a big discussion on the role played by the high segmentation of the Chinese market. It was not highlighted so much in tonight's presentation, but I think there's a very interesting point that the book makes, that the Chinese firms managed to achieve initial success from a low-end market segment and in markets protected by the government. And this relates also to the size of the Chinese economy, which allows for this high segmentation. And the book compares it to Japan, Korea, and other contexts. One idea that was in the last book, Professor Keun, that I find also very insightful is this idea of the cycle time. So the book provides a more kind of nuanced description of technological regimes, not only taking the nature of knowledge, but also the cycle time of technology. And to summarize, the book calls us attention to the fact that rapid technological cycles provide lower entry barriers for latecomer firms, but at the same time, they interfere with the Chinese effort to catch up with the ever-moving forerunners. I think Professor Eduardo calls it the Red Queen effect, the fact that I have to kind of run faster if I need to keep up with the state-of-the-art frontier of technology development. And the fourth highlight here is this Thucydides trap, which was very nicely defined today as the situation where the US causes China to stop expanding as an economic power, and the tension between the old and the new. And this trap is then kind of combined with the middle income trap, as Keun explained tonight, using global value chains also as these linkage variables, which also seemed a very, very original contribution, very interesting way of looking at the phenomenon. And in the book, he also mentions the democratization trap related to the socioeconomic problems, the political systems. And so this idea of triple trap also sounds nice, right? Triple trap, I think, is also a highlight of the book. And finally, I'll leave here some questions and kind of warm up issues for the audience. So in the book, the concept of windows of opportunity is discussed in depth. And there are three kinds considered: the emergence of a new techno-economic paradigm, economic downturns, and changes in government regulations and interventions. In the presentation tonight, Professor Keun, you mentioned also the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Does it, in your view, open new windows of opportunities for latecomers in light of this growing evidence of the intensification of digitalization during the pandemic, alongside the significant institutional change? And also taking into the perspective that the digitalization agenda of the US government has also been very much aligned with the desire to bring back manufacturing to the US, it might also actually hamper Chinese catch-up. So in one way, as you correctly pinpointed, that Chinese economy is doing better than the rest of the world during the pandemic in terms of growth, if we just take this index. But on the other hand, if we think that digitalization might be accelerated or is accelerating the US, that might mean that more US companies may bring back manufacturing to the US, which seems to me also a big part of this technological agenda. These ideas of socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is also a peculiarity of China, very well discussed in the book. And I was just also wondering if you could elaborate more on this complex role of government. We are seeing that the state-controlled business are responsible for 78% of total revenues. That's the figure in the book, while the share of private firms have been growing. And finally, it couldn't be different, Professor Keun, also in light of the edition here of this Brazilian journal you've worked for, related to the middle income trap. There are some thoughts on takeaways for the Brazilian context. Brazil is mentioned already in the first chapter of the book, I think page 2, and a couple of times later on chapter 10 as well, as an example of a country that has been stuck in the middle income trap for decades. So if you could please also provide your thoughts or takeaways for Brazil in light of the Chinese experience. So I'll stop here, Renato, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Very interesting comments. I invite now again Professor Keun Lee to make some comments, some thoughts about Anna's observations.
Okay.
Keun, please, the floor is yours again.
Because Anna kindly shared her slide comment in advance, I also prepared 2-page as my response. So let me share that again. She first commented about role of government, right? So this one shows that in the book, there are some other chapters discussing this topic in broad, more in deeply, chapter 6 and 7. And that chapter is drawing upon this article published in Cambridge Journal of Religion, Economic Society. I discussed manufacturing, also software sectors. So role of government in China very important in some sectors, but not in every sectors. So the issue what is the right form of activism in government? That's the issue, tricky issues. For example, local procurement worked in telephone equipment for the growth of Huawei. Also, local content requirement worked very fine in autos and wind turbine in China, so that's Leapfrog. But although there are many failures in other countries. In high-tech sectors, just licensing actually not enough, but requires different mode of intervention, such as public-private joint R&D. This happened great in China, Korea and China recently. And foreign domestic joint R&D for developing some technologies, and inviting foreign engineers or doing M&As. So in other words, different mode of intervention government should be combined with different mode of learning and catching up, a source of technology transfers. And so there is no one-size-fits-all ideas, but yet tailored to different contexts or different sectors, whether it is high tech, low tech, short cycle, long cycle, and so on. Okay. Then she also mentioned about the implication of Brazil. I guess broadly we can combine catching up and leapfrogging. So nowadays people are talking about there are several pathways for development beyond middle income stages. First, as you mentioned, leapfrogging in short cycle sectors like IT, manufacturing. Brazil may try to do more ambitious in bringing electric cars and new source of the transportation, but also not manufacturing, but also IT services like mobility, games, mobile payment, travel. These are new sources of growth. India is doing well in terms of based on growth-based IT services. IT service also low entry barriers. It's also short cycle services. The last, resource-based development, but it has to be high value added, export-oriented. Example is the Chilean the wines and vegetable forest goods. Also in Malaysia, nowadays doing well, not in manufacturing, but also in rubber product, petroleum product, and palm oil product, and so on. So those are new sources of growth, not just manufacturing, but you country resource-based sectors. So, but all three things, common pattern is you got to find low entry barrier sectors. So short cycle low entry barriers, IT service low entry barriers, resource base is also low entry barriers if you have resources in the sector. And entry barrier very important in middle income stages because you get close to frontier, you got to compete against incumbent. That's how you have to find niches, which means low entry barriers. Okay, so these are my broad responses. Okay, and regarding role of a pandemic, as you mentioned, because China growing faster than US, that's helping China, but also in pandemic period, people, all countries should be relying on each others. We need a great global coordination, help each others to overcome pandemic. In that sense, it is helping China because we cannot just to confrontate each others to go over pandemic. Yeah.
Thank you, Keun.
Yeah.
I think we have some minutes for two questions, and we received two questions from the audience. The first question is from my colleague, Marcos Barbieri from the University of Campinas. And Marcos is asking about Taiwan, the relation between Taiwan and China, and especially in terms of the high technology capabilities of Taiwan in microelectronic technology. And the second and the last question is from Euler Neto. And Euler is asking about the whole of what we call the industry 4.0, the technologies of 4.0 in this process of upgrading and the technology of upgrading of China. If you can say some words about these two questions, please, Keun.
Okay, yeah. First, Taiwan has been source of a lot of technology and input for China's growth. In a sense, Korea too. So many China is inviting many engineers, scientists come to mainland, and they invite many investment from Korea and Taiwan, and they're also doing a lot of M&As. So neighboring economies has been source of growth, technical catch-up in China in a sense, very important. But nowadays, neighboring economy getting more sensitive about technical transport because China is rising very rapidly. Okay, so that's one issue facing Japan, Korea, Thailand in terms of how to handle. But it's not that simple because we need China's market, and there needs to be some cooperation in businesses. They're relying upon each other. So that's why decoupling is not easy. Okay, yeah. But now China is relying on more on their own sources technology. Okay, yeah. So So actually the US is pushing Asian economies don't do trade with China, and that's not easy because, for example, semiconductors, Korean Samsung selling their semiconductor, almost 70% is from China market. US is less than 10%. Okay, both Samsung still relying on some technology from US. So we are torn between these two powers' influences. US saying that don't export to China, but China say if you join Quad, then there will be a disaster, something like that. So very difficult situation between this. So the two powers should not be fighting each other for global economy.
Okay.
Yeah. And in the 4.0, China is leapfrogging in that area much faster than other countries. Yeah. And, China is the only country that has counterpart to Google, Facebook, and Amazon. They have the Alibaba and the Baidu and the Tencent, direct counterpart. So that's why I'm saying China's leapfrogging is leading to catching up. So I see linkage from technical leapfrogging. You cannot catch up. Catch means close the gap. So China is catching up, close the gap with the US by doing technological leapfrogging, moving ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Keun. I think we are running out of time, and I want to thank you again, Keun, for the very, very interesting presentation. I am very excited to read your new book. And I invite all the audience, even in YouTube, here in Zoom, to download, to enter in the personal website of Professor Keun Lee and download the 2 chapters that are available in the book. And we will wait. We wait for the whole book to your pleasure. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I can send you more chapters of PDF if you send an email. Okay.
Okay, of course. We will appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
I want to
Bye.
thank you, Anna. Thank you, Keun.
We hope to see you in physically next year.
Yeah, I hope very, very soon, very soon.
Okay.
And for the whole audience, I want to invite everybody. We will continue the Brazilian ENEI tomorrow with parallel sessions in the morning and plenary sessions in the afternoon. The sessions about COVID in the afternoon and about the agenda for innovation agenda from Brazil. So good night, everybody. Good evening. Professor Keun has already left us. See you, everybody, tomorrow. We will continue this meeting tomorrow. Thank you very much. Anna, thank you very much again. Bye.